Hey, what's up, guys? Chad here with the Reptile Rangers. Now, we're at the Clintonville Reptile Zoo and Medical Center again today, and we're going to talk about housing large constrictors. Just before we get into that, our subscriber button. Make sure you hit that. We appreciate all those that have and following along week after week, video after video. Now, let's get right into this. All right, so in this video, we're going to talk briefly about housing large constrictors, just giving kind of an overview of, well, a lot of right ways you can do it, but also a lot of the wrong ways that we see folks doing large constrictors inside of the pet hobby. Let's just start right off. Everything from something like a boa constrictor, a good-sized red-tailed boa, up to the berm, the Indian, the rock python, the reticulated python, and both the condas. There are several species of large constricting snakes that require, if you're going to do it correctly, an immense amount of space. Now, there are a lot of folks that do keep berms in rack systems. They keep them in rack systems, and that's kind of pointless. Unless it's a baby one or a young one and you've got it in a nice big rack that has got plenty of room to stretch out in. We're generally speaking, we're talking about the large specimens, adult specimens. Now, with getting a large constrictor, you should be prepared for the long-term care of these animals, which in turn is definitely the food they're going to be consuming and the appropriate housing that they're going to need so that you can maintain optimum health and these animals can have an enjoyable life, not just stuck in something they can barely move in. You know, rack systems are not always bad. They are useful when it comes to like breeding places and facilities and people that are breeding on a large scale. But kind of a rule of thumb is, you know, if you can't house your animals correctly, then apparently you have too many to be able to deal with. So a lot of people do these types of animals and other animals just for the money. And, well, don't be a money-hungry scumbag. And don't be a piece of trash putting big animals in small enclosures just because you want to have a bunch of effing animals so that you can try and breed a bunch of effing animals so that you can just try and make a bunch of money off of this animal suffering in something that it should not be housed in. Now, there's all kinds of enclosures that you can do. I mean, you'll see examples of big breeders in these, these elaborate things like vision cages and boa files and animal plastics cages and many, many others. Those are okay as long as it's done within size. But when you take a 10, 12, 14-foot snake and you put it in something that's 6 foot long and 2 foot deep, not quite big enough there, chief. Find something bigger or get rid of the animal. And again, I go back to a lot of these folks, and you'll see this a lot of the times, a lot of these folks will have these things just stacked. They'll have rows and rows and rows of them. And again, I mean, if you're talking a 6 foot by 2 foot pen for something that's, 4 to 7 feet, 4 to 8 feet, something like that, okay, not too terribly bad. But once it starts exceeding about 10 feet, they need space. Lots and lots of space. This snake right here is almost 16 feet. You can see this pen just continues to go this direction. Right here is one end of it. She's right here in the backside, and she's stretching partially out. She's got a ton of space to come more forward. This is a natural habitat, though. And not everybody can afford to build something quite like this, and we understand that. But again, the point of it is don't just take a big steak and stuff it in something that it can barely fit into, or it's barely going to have any room to stretch out in just because you wanted to fulfill a wet fantasy of having a big snake, or you're just some idiot that's just wanting to mass produce animals just because you think there's money in it. Have some actual character. These animals need room. They need room, for one, so that they can be healthy. They can have a little bit of mobile room. Because let's be real. I mean, how many people with these types of snakes have the ability to just be able to pull every one of those snakes out that they have and allow them to be able to exercise across the floor, across the yard, whatever the case may be? And that's just an impossibility. So try and make sure that you're giving these animals at least enough space for their size so that they can have a healthy and live a healthy life. Now, you can control the size somewhat in a large constrictor by controlling their feeding. Some people do what's called power feeding, and they get the snakes really big, really fast, most of the time for production or for showing off. That's the key reason for getting one incredibly enormous. And I'll lack from using one person that is pretty well known of having obese snakes. All right, and we'll avoid that topic because of For obvious reasons, those are incredibly, insanely obese snakes. That's nothing but just trying to show off just for that person's own personal gain and goal, and so that you can help pad their pockets a little bit. Has nothing to do with education, has nothing to do with conservation. Again, remember, when you're looking at getting a large constrictor of any form, there's so many different things that you can do when it comes to enclosures. Boas love to go high, and you can do things like china cabinets or bigger. You can build nice high enclosures that gives plenty of limbs and plenty of things for them to climb on. You can do plenty of substrate where they can hide on the ground. When you're talking things like Burmese and reticulated and your condas and animals like that, try to be aware and be mindful of the fact that they're going to need a good, fair amount of space. Now, again, we understand, and so do many people, that you can't just always build a 14-foot, 2-foot tall, 8-foot deep pen. That's an impossibility. But also at the same time, understand when you're getting these animals, you need to get them with the understanding that they're going to need space. And also don't forget that they're going to be being fed some pretty serious size food when they start getting older. So be ready for that expense, and make sure, for one, that you can find a supplier that is actually going to be able to give you that helping hand with feeding your animal the appropriate food. You don't need to overfeed them. You don't need to underfeed them. You don't need to power feed them. There's no reason for that, and especially for certain species that are more lazy, like the Burmese. By power feeding them, you shorten down their lifespan drastically because you create an obese snake with a lot of fatty content, and that does hurt those animals long term. When we're talking the types of enclosures that you can do custom built PVC enclosures. You can do rack systems again for the younger ones, big rack systems, things like that. But again, the more animals you have, the more you have to be aware of. They are going to grow, and that they're going to need something that's going to require some serious amount of space so that you have a healthy, happy animal. There are many types of things that are already built that people use. Again, as I aforementioned, for something like a boa, big, massive china cabinets, larger gun cabinets, things like that. Yes, there's glass in there, and that can be a danger if you have, depending on a social boa or one that can be a little bit more defensive and swingy. You want to be very careful so that whatever it is that you're building or whatever it is that you're using is not going to take a chance on damaging the animal, like broken glass or things like that. But you can build your own. You can build tall, you can build long, you can build deep. You can build and create whatever you want. Just again, the key purpose for this video is just giving that reminder, just being aware of what size that snake is going to become, depending on what species of snake that you get. And just making sure that they're going to have sufficient room to not be stuffed in something small just because you wanted a cool snake, or because you want to breed what you think is cool snakes. Make sure they have room to be happy and healthy. When we start talking about substrate and things like that, there's so many different topics of substrate, so many different things that you can use. I'm not really going to dive deep into substrates and how to set them up and things like that, because there is conjectures and there is differences of opinions, and there are a lot of things that do absolutely work. There's some things that do not work. So you can create your own ecosystem to your liking based off of information that's out there and available to you, based off of people's experiences with different bedding materials and different housing items and different things like that. And you can create your own world for your large constrictor. Again, this is Chad. We are the Reptile Rangers here at the Kernersville Reptile Zoo. This is just a brief video on just being aware of, if you're going to get large constrictors or breed large constrictors, just being mindful that you're giving them adequate space in housing that they need so that they stay happy and healthy for you for longer than just a few short years of production. Make sure to write us in. Let us know of other things you want us to film about. Feel free to leave a comment. Our information will be in the description below for those needing to get in touch with us. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, like button, the bell for notification. All of our social media will be below. And we do appreciate you guys following along. Feel free and come see us here at the store in the zoo. If you need anything, absolutely let us know. We'll either see you here at the zoo or we'll see you on the next episode. Later.